This transfer request is to initially set up a budget to take us from January, basically February 1st through June 30th, in taking over the operations of Tilly's.
Council Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike, you know, I looked at this budget, it's the heating, it's all those operational things. Does this include any plans on is this any of the money for the new plan that you want to implement for the farm?
This is basically going to get us started. There's 16,000 for building maintenance, and that'll take care of some of the issues with various furnaces and heating systems, and some maybe safety issues that we will get started with. But in order to do the full conversion, you know, we're going to have to approach that in the 2018 budget.
Councilor Manning.
Yes, the health insurance, I see you have full-time and part-time. Is the health insurance strictly for full-time employee?
That's correct.
So it's $11,000 for one full-time employee?
We're going to have 2 full-time employees initially, and that's an approximate cost of two plans.
Okay, so it's 2 full-time employees for $36,000. So it's just 18 apiece for 2 full-time, yet one. And
Well,
how many part-time? Part-time was 17,000.
Yeah, we put in a number of part-time positions. I don't have that breakout with me. I recall it's, do you remember? 10? 6 or 8.
So there's 6 or 8 people for 17,000?
It's from April to end of June. Because the full-time people really will start in February, and then the store opens in April. So that's really when the part-time people.
So it's basically 3 months worth of part-time.
Okay, so 3 months of part-time, 17,000. And then 2 employees for 6 months at 36,000?
Correct.
So a full-time position, so was it 18,000 for 6 months?
One of the
One person?
One of the full-time positions is 23,876, and the other one is 40-hour a week, and it's budgeted for 12,600. So that's where the 36,000 comes from.
So then that's really not full-time, right?
It's going to be full-time seasonal.
Full-time seasonal, but we would give health insurance for full-time seasonal?
We do.
What's our bare minimum for giving health insurance?
The person would be working 40 hours a week for more than 16 weeks. It'd be more like 40 weeks a year. It's almost full-time. So we'd have to, according to the ACA, we have to, once they average more than 30 hours a week, we have to give health benefits.
For the entire year or just the 6 months?
For the time when they're employed.
So just for the 6 months?
Well, she would be employed probably pretty much longer.
So they're going to be working 6 months, but they're going to get full year health insurance?
The full-time person will be working year-round. This other seasonal full-time person would be working probably more like 10 months. So for the 2 months that they don't work, we wouldn't have to offer the insurance, but you know, it gets complicated.
They would have the option. The way a seasonal would work is they'd have the option to COBRA at that point in time for the 2 months, and then they would come back on. And there's a 30-day relaxation period or a 60-day relaxation period at COBRA. So it would require that you would open the option up for 60 days based on the fact that
Okay. That's COBRA, and that's when someone is without health insurance, so that you cover their health insurance. But this is, where is it Where is it written what we are required as a city to provide in health insurance, given the new health insurance laws?
In accordance with the Affordable Care Act, it's more than 30 hours a week. And if you work more than 30 hours a week for a month, you have to offer health insurance. So if this person's working 10 months, we have to offer 10 months worth of health insurance. And then when they have a break in service, then they can go on the COBRA.
But just to clarify that, and for those 2 months, they have an option to elect within 60 days. If they're going to be employed in the 3rd month after the election, they wouldn't have to elect, they'd still be covered, and you'd still have to pay for it, is the way it works. COBRA
Okay,
works.
thank you.
Concept is great, it works. If the person's going to be unemployed then thereafter, at the end of the 60 days, the following the election period, they'd have to start to pay on their own. But you're pretty much you're stuck with it for 60 days, is the way it works. John?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, through you to Mike. So the full-time position, it adds up to roughly $48,000, plus we're missing the month of January. What is the actual salary for the year?
It's approximately 47,000.
It's $47,000. And the seasonal part-time for the complete year?
Well, it's going to be $15 an hour.
$15. And what are the 2 positions? A farm manager is one that I know of.
And right now, it's a part-time seasonal farm worker.
Okay, and just my last question is just regards to the water. I don't mean to nitpick, but it seems extremely low for a farm. $800 for 6 months. And
We looked at some of the records that they gave us, and they were using around 700. And we don't plan on doing a lot of planting other than in the greenhouses this season, so that should be adequate.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, just for the council's sake, there was a payroll sheet that was included in the packet, and on that page, the vacant assistant farm stand manager is $47,753, and the remaining salary for the fiscal year is $23,876.50. And then there's a part-time seasonal retail farm stand for 840 hours for that period at 15, bringing it to 12,600 for a total of 36,476.50. And then a part-time cashier for 1,500 hours on an hourly basis between $11 and $12 per hour, 17,000. So that's the breakout of those salary expenses. Any other questions from the councilors? Being none, I will take a motion to accept the transfer from budgeted reserve in the amount account 100-13-20-57-410 in the amount of $140,000 to the various accounts as displayed. On the motion, any questions? Being none, roll call.
Councilors Walsh.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Charist.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Gravel.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Second item on the agenda is the transfer of funds relative to building department salaries in the amount of $291,000. Mr. Gingrich.
There was another item on the other sheet, the funding from budget reserve on page 2 of the letter. There you go.
Oh, I'll take a second motion to get to the $140,000 for the budget reserve in the amount of $11,700.
So moved.
Transfer this salary. So moved by Councilman Manning Martin. Any questions? Being none, roll call.
Councilors Walsh.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Charist.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Gravel.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Item 7B on the issue of $291,000 for building department salaries. Mr. Gingrich.
The building department is essentially going to be a transfer out of community development to establish its own department. Other than that, there's $11,250 from budgeted reserves to help with the director's salary. And what happened was I met with Al and with Karen. We went through Karen's community development budget and to establish what the needs would be for the building department.
Council Manning Martin.
Thank you. What's the travel allowance, 6750? What's that for?
They, each of the inspectors gets allocated a monthly travel stipend for their driving around the city. And
Then what's the gas? Because you have gas there too for 5,000. Don't they fill up their gas with the city?
yes, I think they also get gas too.
So what's the travel allowance for?
They get both.
Why is that?
I can't answer that right now. I'd have to look and see what the history of it was, but they do.
Because you either put in for gas or you don't. So,
Well, the only thing I could speculate would be that the travel allowance itself wasn't high enough, so instead of increasing the travel allowance, they allowed people to get gas.
but it's either for gas or it's not for gas. What else could travel be?
Travel's wear and tear on your car too, so there's a combination. I can look into it further.
So do any of them have their own, how many city vehicles are in this department that are used?
There should be no city vehicles.
They all use their own private vehicles?
That's correct.
Given that that was somewhat of a weak answer in terms of the purposing, I would recommend that we reduce the request from 291,100 and eliminate either the travel allowance or the gasoline until we get a better understanding as to why there's two of them there.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to strike the travel allowance, 6750. So I'll make a motion to approve 291,100 minus 6750.
On the motion?
You can just do that quick math for me, Dave. Thanks.
Hold on, Ann. It's evening. Numbers are good. I love it. So Councilor Manning Martin is making a motion to approve $284,350, which will come from the budgeted reserve in the amount of $11,250 and the various community development departments in the amount of $273,100. For a total of $284,350. On that motion, any questions? Being none, roll call.
Councilors Walsh.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Gravel.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
The members of the Municipal Safety Committee. Huh? Council Sinowitz, we can have you sit in for Council Gould anyway on the committee? Thank you. Okay, first on the agenda. Where's the agenda, buddy? Last time we talked about a pole-mounted electronic speed signs. Councilor Walsh, I believe it was. How's that from memory?
Very good, Mr. Chairman, I'm impressed. No, Mr. Chairman, we had brought this before the committee. We had a brief discussion as an entire council a couple weeks ago about this. Hoping to purchase some pole-mounted electronic speed limit signs. From what I understand, the cost of them is roughly $2,000. And currently we have about 3 in the city, one on Lake Street, one on Lynn Street, and one right on Main Street. And they seem to be fairly effective in slowing traffic down. So our hope is that the police department would entertain the thought of purchasing some more and putting them in some of our high traffic areas. So with that, I don't know if anybody from the police department would like to comment on it.
Okay, thank you. Would the chief like to come up and speak on that? Or Captain Richards?
Good evening. My name's Tom Griffin. I'm the police chief here in the city of Peabody. This is Captain Richards. He's in charge of traffic. From what I understand, that we do have a few signs in the city to purchase more. We don't have any designated funds at this point, but that's something we could consider and try and put together some funds, or if there's another resource, we'd certainly like to try and investigate that as well.
Okay, Council Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the chief. Chief, the ones that we do have, are you finding that they're effective, that they slow traffic down?
I think they do. I think it reminds people the speed as they're going down, and there's almost an automatic reaction to that. People tend to put their foot on the brake, and unless you find something different, Cap, I think that's... Because
the studies that I've seen show somewhere between 2 and 8% reduction in speed, the amount of people who speed when they go by these signs. The other part of that question, I guess, would be, we are at the point where you're developing your budget for the next fiscal year.
Yes.
Could these be included, decide on a certain number and where they would best be utilized and include that in your budget?
Certainly, we could submit that with the budget. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Councilor Manning?
Thank you. The signs that you do have up, I'm looking up your annual police report here. So the signs that you do have up, do you feel that they're placed in the appropriate place? And I ask that because I'm looking for the page, the one I don't bring my laptop, so bear with me. Yeah, you have a breakdown of accidents designated in certain areas. Main Street with pedestrian accidents is the highest, and accidents at intersections is Endicott and Lowell. So I'm guessing where you do have the ones located, do you find that they're in the best place, or should we move them to these areas where we have pedestrian accidents and they might be better utilized to reduce your accidents and reduce increase pedestrian safety, or accidents at the intersections that you've designated as problem areas?
I think that's something we can look at. With the city growing as it is, I think how long have they been in place?
They've been there for quite a while.
It might be something that it's time now to reevaluate. Obviously, if we could afford to have more, we'd love to be able to do that. But we can look at that and check and see if,
Sure, where are they?
where are
How
they
many
right
do you
now,
have
sir?
and where are they?
There's three.
There's three.
There's one on Lynn Street by the old Brown School. There's one on Lake Street. There's one on Lynn Street by the old Brown School. There's one up on Lake Street by the McCarthy School. And I believe there's one on Main Street, yes, on Main Street.
Is there one by the police station too, on Allen's Lane?
No, that's just a signboard. That's just a message board. It's not a radar board.
So you have one on Lynn Street,
Yes.
by where?
By the old Brown School.
Okay, and then where's the other one?
It's on Lake Street by the McCarthy School. I believe it's up in that general area up on Lake Street by the McCarthy School. And those were, I believe, those have been deployed there for quite some time, and I
Right.
believe it was
I don't
because of the
see, I
Brown
don't even
School and
see
McCarthy
Lake
School.
Street on here as a problem area. And where's the other one?
It's down on Main Street.
And Main Street is a problem area. Okay. I think with the three that you do have, you probably need more, but the three that you do have, I would just suggest you take a look with the data that you do have and make sure you're using them effectively. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council Walsh, anything else?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think we had made a motion recently, so I would just like to forward that to the police department and hope that we can include in the FY18 budget funding for some of these signs to be put up. And we'll also look at alternative funding too, see if there's any grants or anything else that we might be able to take advantage of.
Okay, good. I don't think we put a number on the signs. I think we left that kind of to the police department. If we have 3 now, do we need to double it and have 6, which we have 9? So I guess that would be up to the police department.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda was review intersections, Summer Street, north onto Centennial Drive. Councilor Charis.
Thank you, Chairman. I brought this matter up when you're coming out of Centennial Drive to Summit to take a left. There is no stop line on the road itself, and where the island is set back further, when your traffic who comes up Summit to take a left onto Centennial Drive to go towards the highway, they cut that corner pretty sharp. So if you're edging yourself out so you can have a visible line down Summit to turn left, they're coming right at your nose of the car. And it's kind of a difficult turn, especially between 4, 5, 6 o'clock at night, to make that turn, to be able to get out and see, just to see down Summit to take that left. So I'm interested into having at least a stop line painted on the road, or anything else that would be suggested, that those people who are turning left to leave the city don't take it so sharp.
Okay, so did we make a motion on that the last meeting?
We made a motion to send it to
The
committee.
Committee,
to
okay.
to reach out to see what the best answer would be, at least for a stop line painted on the road would be.
Yeah,
the
I
first
think
step.
maybe we should make a motion for police department, traffic department to take a look at it.
Yes,
And then we-
absolutely, but I would like to make a motion, at least a stop line to be painted where they feel is more appropriate, because there's nothing there now.
So we send that to DPW, a motion to DPW.
So move.
On the motion, Counsel Sessler? On the motion, all in favor, any opposed? Let's vote. Sessler?
I just wanted to, I concur with my counsel, but also what's happening up there, and while the police and DPW are in the room, is you have 2 or 3 houses being built right there also. So we're both getting calls. There's a lot of concern with the residents on Forest Street and Summer Street. You have basically across the street from the entrance to Centennial Park, I believe 2 or 3 houses that are under construction right now. So I'd ask the police department that, we know it's a problem already. Just look at it, and maybe you might have any advice or any suggestions, because it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse, especially when that person's trying to back out and those 2 or 3 people pulling in out of that little area there. And they might eventually go 6, 7, or 8 houses deep in there. We don't know, but we know 3 right now are being built right across the entrance to Centennial Park. So I'm concerned about that. I think my fellow Ward 4 councilor is also. Thank you.
Thank you. Harris.
Yes, and just in addition, if the police, when looking at it, if they feel the island should be extended out, because it's kind of a short island, that'd be great. So move.
Put that in there on the motion.
So move.
Okay. For tonight's business, glad everybody could come in the nice weather. We'll be taking a boat home to West Peabody, probably. Anyway, okay, so tonight we're here for a discussion on 0 Birch Street subdivisions, and Councilor Barry Sinowitz had spoke to me a few weeks ago on this, and I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Sinowitz so he can make his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, I want to once again thank the residents for coming out tonight on this not the best of nights. And thank you to our department heads, our police, our fire, building inspector, our superintendent of schools, our police department, our Board of Health, our DPW. So thank you for your concern in coming out for this. So there's a development going to be built or proposed to be built at the end of Birch Street. The property was originally owned by Bostic, and I believe in 2001 Richardson's bought it for $1.1 million, and the land is kind of languished there. I don't know why it was never developed, but there is currently a purchase and sale by the current developer. If he gets his proposal through, then that land will transfer to him. That's what I was told by his attorney. So, and I just want to make it clear that this city council does not have a vote per se, whether we're against it or we're for it. That comes down solely to the planning board. The planning board approves these projects. What we do is we want to frame, and that's why I asked all these department heads here and the residents here to frame the issues that we would be concerned about as the development goes in. Now, once we do that, we get the recommendations from everybody. We come up with an order of conditions that we present to the planning board, and asking the planning board, please, this is what we're concerned about. If this is going to be a 5-year project, it says 5 years in here. It could be less, it could be more. We don't know. That it's the least disruptive to our neighborhoods, and we have a school right up the street. So that's kind of the gist of it. There's 23 homes going to be built. First I thought it was 24. There's 23, but there's one lot at the end that it's not labeled for a house lot, but so I don't know if there's a potential to build, and I don't know what the purpose of that lot is, but it is on the plans. And by the way, all the plans are up here. Somebody wants to take a quick look, they're on the table over there. They're all 20,000 square foot lots. It's R1 zone. It's all in Peabody. All have 125 foot frontage. So on that part, it's okay. It's legal within our zoning. Okay. So the access of this property is going to go through Birch Street and Villa Lane. At the bottom of Villa Lane, if you know where Villa Lane is, it's a big hill. It dead ends into the woods, and it would wrap around. There's going to be a handle off of it for a small cul-de-sac with about 8 homes, and then from there it filters down, and you would go out onto Birch Street. That access is at about 103 Birch Street. I think Eddie Miranda, I don't know if Eddie's here tonight, but it would come out right smack, I believe, in front of Eddie's house. The potential, that's called Tanner's Ridge Road, is the cul-de-sac, and Villa Lane would continue on. If the developer gets his wishes, he looks to start in the spring of 2017. Okay. So, we had a meeting last week. We had some neighborhood meetings, a lot of talk. I met with the mayor and a lot of the department heads last week to discuss what our concerns are over this development. And I guess the first one is, and the most obvious, is truck access. This is a heavily residential area with Birch Street sitting as a one-way street. So it's a real problem if we're talking about bringing numerous truck trips, and there will be numerous truck trips. I don't want anybody to say that there won't be, there will be. And the Burke School is a problem. It's a one-way street between 8:15 and 9 o'clock at night, and in the morning. You're not going to get a car by there with the drop-off. And then about 2:15 to 3 o'clock, you're in the same position. So that's a concern. So how would these trucks get to this site? And I attended the planning board meeting, and one of the obvious ways, I thought, to relieve probably 70 or 80% of the nonsense that is going to go on is at the backside, I don't know if it's Main Street, on the Bostic side, there's a clear path that goes right into the property. And I mentioned it at the meeting, and the developer was concerned about whether he can get approvals. I mentioned it to the mayor. The mayor would be fully in support of that. But that would take all the traffic off those streets. It would be perfect. So then you deal with the other issues, if that's doable. And I think, you know, the city of Peabody would do anything it could to help to get that, make that happen. If it doesn't happen, then we're looking at trucks weaving through, go up Catherine, down Teresa, up Magnolia, down Villa, down Birch Street, or you're going to come up Hamilton to Heath to Birch. There's numerous ways without sending large amounts of construction vehicles daily into this site. So that's a concern. Later on, we're going to hear from the police in terms of what their take is on, and I'm not expecting them tonight to know all the answers, but to do some research and tell us if it can't go through Middleton, and I'm going to push hard for that, what would be the appropriate truck routes. And I know that whatever the truck route is, if it doesn't go through Middleton, people are going to be unhappy. We're all going to be unhappy, but we have to deal with the hand we're dealt sometimes. But, and I'm concerned about the end of Birch Street's very narrow, and as it comes around that bend, that's a real concern, and the speed, and the safety of the kids in the school, in all those neighborhoods that walk to school, okay? In the past, in Ward 1, when there was an issue with truck routes and the developer wasn't cooperative, the police had the option to go to the state, go to the DOT, they file a registered truck route. So those trucks have to follow that route, and we have recourse if they start wandering through our neighborhoods where they can be fined or ticketed. So that's always something that hopefully we don't have to do, but hopefully it's a cooperative thing. But I don't think you're going to ever stop it, because you could have people that not go to the site often and GPS doesn't work, and they'll be weaving their way through different residential neighborhoods. So, and this is where, when we talk about order of conditions, where hours of operation come into play. Are they working Monday through Friday? Are weekends out? Out of respect of what they're going to do. What about the earth removal permits? That's another whole issue. Because what will happen is, if the hours of operation are 7 in the morning, those people will be lining up early. They'll be coming in early with deliveries because they're going to want to get going. They'll line up in the street. We've seen that. I think some of the councilors from Ward 1 can give pretty good accounts of some of the issues. And I'm not making this stuff up to worry people. This has happened in Ward 1. And that's why we're doing this tonight, so to be proactive, so this doesn't happen. And we need to have an order of conditions, that's solid. Okay, so let's move on from truck access. Now, when I went to the planning board meeting, what was a little disturbing to me is there was no, in the report, it said there's no mention of blasting, okay? We don't anticipate blasting. There were 49 borings done. I know the land pretty well. There's rock everywhere. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, then that's awesome. But if there is blasting, so what happens is the planning board doesn't address it. We don't anticipate any blasting. So when I pushed the issue a little, I talked about, well, that's great then, no blasting, we don't need a rock crusher on site. And then the developer says, no, we want a rock crusher. So that's a different issue, and I'll have the fire department come up and talk about what happens to a neighborhood when they have to deal with blasting, and I'm sure the Ward 1 councilor can tell you a little more about that also. But I want to talk about the rock crushing bit, and I'm not saying blasting is good by any chance, stretch of the imagination, but the rock crushing and rock excavation can be probably one of the worst parts of this project. Because what's going to happen is, if you know the property, they're going to go in, they're going to start tearing it up, and they're going to come across a lot of stone. Might not have to blast. I hope you don't have to blast. But what they're going to do is they're going to take an excavator, and they're going to attach a device called a hammer. And they're going to be boom, 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 all day, or whatever it takes to crush that rock. They'll take that rock, they'll stockpile it, they'll put it over by a rock crusher until they get a big enough pile to crush it, and then they'll start rock crushing. And then with rock crushing comes the dirt, the wind, it's going to blow all over the neighborhood. There's different things you can do with rock crushers, and it all comes with what type of rock crusher he decides to rent. You can put a spray on the rock so the rock doesn't get as wet. You can put rubber around the metal grate so we're not doing metal on metal so the neighbors don't hear all day long, because that's what you're going to hear. And don't forget, the land will be clear cut. So a lot of those trees, and I don't know what the buffer zones are. No one's told me what the buffer zones are. Okay? So that's a concern. I'm going to have Dr. Levine address a little of that because of the school and blowing of the dirt and the rock crushing over to it. The prevailing winds go right to the school. Okay. Thirdly, to me, is the drainage issue and where we're going with this. The elevation from, as you know, Villa Lane, all that runoff comes down from Brookbridge, Herbert, part of Magnolia, and Mr. Wilcox used to get devastated till we try to help him a little over there with all that runoff. And that road will continue on. The elevation goes down to 132 and goes down to 105. So it all goes like this. As it comes around, it turns. The cul-de-sac is downgrade, so you're going to have ejector pumps to take the sewerage up the road, up to the top of Villa, and gravity will take it down to Birch Street. So behind Mr. O'Neill's house, and somewhere in that vicinity, there's 140 by 120 by 3 foot deep detention basin that's planned. So I'm not an expert at drainage. That's why I have the DPW here. I have conservation. So they must be worried about runoff if they're going to put something like that in there. And once again, I'm not an expert about it, but I've talked to the neighbors on the street, on that lower end of Birch Street, and they'll tell you better tonight about the condition of the water that comes down there now, and if we have a branch off of Villa coming down there. So I think those are my concerns. Trucking, whether hopefully no blasting, they're definitely going to have rock crushing, and I would say to the developer now, I would hope that he has a good relationship with Aggregate Industries where he could take the rock down the street and have it crushed there and bring it back to your site, but that's shooting for the moon, I think. And then the drainage and make sure that people don't get flooded out on the street. So I think that's a kind of an overview how I take it. I could be dead wrong, but that's how I see it. And I'll turn it back to the chairman for his leadership.
Thank you, Councilor. And again, because we've gone through this with Ward 1, we kind of have a better handle on it. And I think that the council brings up some real good points. So I'm going to open it up. Obviously, I don't think there'll be 100 people speaking, but whoever wants to speak is welcome to come up. And then we'll have the department heads speak, and then the council will have their say, and we'll get it rolling. So anyone that wants to speak, just come right up. Just one at a time, though. Okay, that's it. No. You want to say your name and address for the record, George?
Yes, my name's George Smith. I live at 83 Bartholomew Street in South Peabody. I'm a Ward 1 resident, and I have been fighting Solimene for 25 years. From the day he brought that project before the planning board, I've been on his case. And Ann Manning, Councilor Manning, and Councilor Turco can attest to the phone calls that I make to them on a fairly regular basis with some of the issues that you will face with this project. One of the things that did not happen and should have happened with the Solimene project is called an EIR. It's called an Environmental Impact Report. Now, Councilor Sinowitz brought out the drainage issues. The EIR covers all of that. It covers drainage, it covers the vegetation, it covers vernal pools, it covers everything that has got to do with the environment. They are supposed to research that and find out what is going to be moved, what is going to be destroyed, and what the drainage, how it's going to impact drainage. That's what an EIR is supposed to do. That never happened. Therefore, we have still major issues with drainage on Bartholomew Street from the Solimene project. Each building or house that's built contributes 10 vehicle trips per day. So you're looking at 23 houses, that's 230 vehicle trips per day added to your traffic right now. I'm going to go over some of the issues that we have with two of the projects down on Bartholomew Street. One is the Litchfield project, which was a smaller project. He had two projects that went in, and they were about 5 years apart. The first project he put in, the plans were not studied correctly, and as a result, we wound up with a hydrant right in the middle of the sidewalk. Not out on the curb where it's supposed to be, in the middle of the sidewalk. That's only one issue on one project. The other one he still hasn't completed. He's left out the curbing on two of the projects, on two of the houses. On another one, he has ledge coming up through the sidewalk. He's gone. The city's stuck holding the bag, trying to get this issue corrected. Boulderwood. Blasting has been an ongoing issue. It's been from the day one. It's still continuing because every time they put up a house, they have to blast for the foundation. They've done all the major work for the water and sewer and roadway and all of that, but now they're building, blasting for foundations. And I saw that there is an elevation there, and you need to be really careful when looking at those plans about elevation. He will have to blast. As far as crushing, I'm going to disagree with the counselor on this about taking and doing it off-site. It is actually beneficial to the neighborhood if they do it on-site because it presents less traffic. It's a safer means of doing it. And that's all I'll say on it. The blasting, they do what they call time shaving. I stood there in my yard, and I would listen to the horns going off, and they would shave 5, 10, 20 seconds off of each blast. That's money to them. And I know the city's going to tell me that they didn't do it, but I know. I've got the stuff, I write it down, I keep a record of it. Trucks are going to be a constant issue. We have them on our street. It's getting worse. With the increase of general traffic in the area, it increases the traffic on the side streets. Right now, there used to be a 15-minute backup on the ends of our street. It's now like 30-minute backup on our streets during rush hour. The hours of operation, and this is the Bible that they're supposed to be using in the city. This is taken from the state regulations regarding subdivision of land. And in it is a form that states the hours that the state mandated for operation. It's from 7 a.m. Monday through Friday to 5 p.m. 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We are blessed on Bartholomew Street with 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. if they obey it. We've gone down there at 9 o'clock at night and still had people working on houses. So they just don't pay attention to the orders or conditions. We go up there on Sundays, and people are working on homes. Contractors are working on homes. It's like these people just don't get it. And there is little that the resident, I'm going to tell you right now, there's little the resident can do about it. Because we don't have anybody that we can turn to. There's no one that is signed when they do these order of conditions that held responsible to enforce them. That needs to change. When you do the order of conditions, you should have somebody that's held responsible. You should have phone numbers that you can call that will get people up there to shut these people down. I'm going to tell you, don't let them go past 5 o'clock because they're going to work it anyways. You know, and that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, George. Anyone else like to speak? Okay, department heads? Oh, okay. Would you state your name and address for this?
Sure. Joe Sullivan, 4 Brookridge Road. In the discussion, it was mentioned that the land was formerly owned by Bostic, and the question would be, what kind of environmental studies are going to be done? What kind of particulate matter can be potentially people be exposed to? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak? Would you please state your name and address for the record, please?
Bob Calenda, 6 Heath Road. Actually, Heath on the corner of Terry. During the school year, when I'm home, on those off days, and I can tell you it happens all the time, on the corner of Terry and Heath, kids are being picked up. It's the second pickup zone of Birch. Every single day, Monday through Friday. And there are kids going up and down that street, going to their homes from the back path of of the Birch Street School. We can't have the trucks going in those neighborhoods, period. We just can't have it. Even on the drop-off of the kids when they get dropped off at the school. And Chief, if you set a cruiser on the corner of Terry, right past my home, you will catch speeders going very fast up and down Heath. And a lot of the residents in that area know about it. And it happens every single day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sure, okay. You just want to state your name and address for the record, please?
Yeah, John Anazis, 99 Birch Street. My concern is the water coming down Birch Street. The manhole covers, when it's flooding, the manhole covers actually come up off the street. And I don't know if they had it in a plan, but the drainage, is the drainage going to be tying into the drainage that's already on Birch Street? Because that drainage is just not going to be able to take it. The manhole covers, when you get torrential rains, the manhole covers come up 6-7 inches off the plan. And that's my biggest concern.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak?
Hi.
Hi. You want to state your name and address for the record, please?
Margaret Tierney, 6 Scott Drive. I just think this is a disaster. I have no concrete information. Barry, I heard you say that there were prior neighborhood meetings. I received my letter yesterday for this meeting tonight. So I look around, I see some familiar faces. I don't see my direct neighbors. When there's an issue, and there have been many issues, especially on Scott Drive, that said, I am notified by a text or a call from a neighbor or two. I did make some phone calls today. I did have a conversation with personnel at City Hall today that these were mailed out the 8th, which it's dated. I'm going to tell you right now, I grabbed my paper and my mail. When I go into my home, I received it yesterday. I didn't think to keep the postage, because who thinks of that, right? Usually open everything and just read it and pitch the rest. I wish I would have, in case I'm not believed. However, this seems like a done deal. You know, I'm pretty kind of on top of things with issues going around in the city. I am irate. As a single person with no children, I bought this house with the, understanding that something like this wouldn't happen, and it is what it is after growing up in Gardner Park. We are turning into an Everett, a Revere, as far as, everyone's building happy. So I know people can sell their land and so forth, wonderful. But next to a school, that's a one-way, it's a lane. Birch Street is like a curving lane. In fact, when someone comes to my house that's new, I say, oh God, go down the end, take a right, make sure you don't take a left. Don't even go across diagonally, because that's dangerous. It's a lane, go all the way down the lane. It's a creaky little lane, and I'm surprised more people aren't here. I think in all fairness, I did see one neighbor just speak. I think they're not here because either they weren't notified or they were notified last night, like I was. We're talking about building and blasting like it's a done deal. I wasn't invited to any, I won't take it personally, any neighborhood gatherings regarding this project. I don't know who the builder is. I will make it over to get the plans on the table. I know nothing, and I just know rumors of what I've heard in the last year at the block party, so, which will probably be something else that, won't happen because of 23 other homes, which means what? Everyone has a couple of kids, so about 70 people. I'm just going to ask you all to consider it. I know it's not your neighborhood, although I look around department heads and I look around to some people here, and that's wonderful. I'm glad some people spoke. I'm surprised a lot more didn't. I'm not fully prepared. I was going to come tonight to just observe. I'm very disappointed this is happening. It seems like a done deal. Very unfortunate. It's just me, and it's a community I live in. I live on Scott Drive. It's a nice community. Like I said, I don't see many here from Scott Drive, and if people were notified, as I was last night, dated by a letter dated November 8th, and I believe they went out November 8th, but I was told a few hundred people, a few hundred neighbors were mailed the same letter. I checked with just a few sitting near me, and they didn't get the letter. So maybe we want to just revisit this. I know it's not, again, your neighborhood, but it is mine. And, I'm a neighbor and a citizen you want to have, single person, no children. You're not paying for, and parents, God forbid, that are deceased. So you're not paying for my parents that are, they're not at the Council on Aging. Children aren't in your school. And I think you just have to listen to us as the taxes go up. We don't want this. I don't want this. Again, speaking for myself. And I listened to a few of the concerns with, the blasting, and the average person wouldn't think of that, but it did trigger something. There's about, and don't quote me, 12 families on my street, and if I'm not right on, I'm pretty close to it. Out of 12, 9 have pools. I think there's very few that don't. What would it do to the pools? A crack in the, we really have to think it through. Everything needs to be considered. So, thank you.
Thank you. Let me just go on. Councilor Turco?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Margaret and actually to all the neighbors, I just want to make sure, and I think Council Senator was already explaining this, but this is a by right project. So I think the general purpose of the meeting is to kind of not run into the issues that we ran into in Ward 1, where you guys can fully protect yourselves now. And I want to thank George for coming. But I just want it to be known that when you say I think it's a done deal, for lack of a better term, I think it is a done deal. I think the project will take place, but we want you to be aware of what you're looking at and what's upcoming, and to protect yourself in the best way you can.
And I appreciate that, Councilor Turgo. I just wish I would have been, invited to a neighborhood meeting that took place. How were they notified? I wasn't. Again, I won't take offense. I wasn't notified. I'm pretty vocal for the the concerns of my neighbors and my city. How were the invitations given out? We've got some huge problems that the police are aware of on Scott Drive, in addition to buildings. So it's just not probably a good time to hear this. Again, getting back to your issues with Solomini and South Peabody, that was a nightmare. It was a disaster. I think this is calling, not to be, negative Nelly. It sounds like it's just not being thought out properly, taken the time. And done deal, I mean we're at stage 3 instead of preliminary. I would have liked to have known, I guess, at a more preliminary stage, being kind of, I consider like up on things, and I haven't gotten any notification, and I didn't read that this had progressed further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Turco.
Okay. If I just might, the Councilor Sinowitz and this council is really, this is a proactive meeting before this even gets going, a year down the road or however, to eliminate any interruptions for the quality of life of the people. This is what this meeting's about, basically. So the planning board's going to know how this council and how the people in Ward 6 in that neighborhood feel. That's why this meeting is here tonight. So we'll continue. And,
hi, good evening. Edward Mirando, 103 Birch Street. So I have a couple concerns for your terms that you're going to propose to the developer. The first is the location of the street on Birch Street. It's at the narrowest point on Birch Street at the end of a blind curve. The street is 14 feet, might be 15 depending on where you measure it. That's just not a smart place to cut a road and put an intersection. So I think that should be considered. Secondly, on the plans, they don't address adding a sidewalk. Again, it's very narrow there. The children frequently walk up Birch Street the wrong way to get to the school. And you know, you're adding a lot of traffic. You're not widening the street, and you're not adding any sidewalks. It's just, should be considered. On top of that, the drainage. So the road does flood. I'm sure it's flooding right now, actually. And all the debris that comes down Birch Street settles right in front of my house, right where they want to put this intersection. And I'm sure Public Works can attest that we call them several times a year, and they have to come out with a street sweeper and pick up all the boulders that are at the bottom of Birch Street. Sometimes traffic can't pass. So again, that goes back to where they're putting the street, why they're not widening the road, and also the sidewalks with the kids. Another issue too, there's a lot of wildlife in those woods. It goes back to the environmental impact study. I don't think anything's been done about that, but I don't know what they're going to do about, you know, the 2 dozen or 3 dozen deer that live on that property. Another neighbor at the planning meeting brought up that there's hawks and eagles as well. I don't know if anyone's contacted the State Environmental Protection Committee. I don't know what they're called officially, but I'd like someone to look into that, or I could do it myself. That's my concerns. Sure.
thank you. Would there anybody else like to speak?
Hi, good evening. My name's Sean O'Neill. I live at 114 Birch Street. I also have a rental property at 112. Just to reiterate what this last gentleman said, Birch Street's been a disaster since I've moved there, from where the sidewalk ends up near Heath all the way down to the end. They put a beautiful bike path down the bottom. People refuse to walk up Birch, and when they do, they're dodging cars as it is. That corner that cuts around, it's almost like a racetrack. I find myself driving a little too fast sometimes. Maybe there should be a yellow blinking light, but if you're cutting a street in there, you're going to get T-boned. I guarantee it's going to happen in the first year. The truck traffic, all the other traffic, I understand that. All great concerns, but the project's going to happen. But cutting a street there without the city investing any new streets or sidewalks, disaster. I don't think it's the builder's responsibility. I think the city needs to, if they're considering this, make the investment.
Thank you. Thank you. You want to say your name and address, please?
Anthony Antonelli, 107 Birch Street. I just want to bring up, you had mentioned that they feel that there's no need for blasting. But I was talking to some of the survey guys that were out there. Obviously, the boring they did didn't cover the entire property. So I'm sure there is some ledge in there. And the only thing I ask is that if there is going to be blasting, that they do some pre-site surveys to make sure that there's no damage to our houses and pools.
Thank you.
Steve Photos, 8 Brookbridge Road. Thank you for coming and giving us your input. It was very nice of you to show up for something that really doesn't, you know, it's not in your backyard. A very nice thing for you to do. And to Joe Sullivan's point, I grew up on Brookbridge Road, I've been in the same house for 51 years. And I can remember as a teenager, 51 years ago, geez, walking into those woods. And there's an area back there that we used to call the pits. And it was like a dry well. And God only knows what was in there. It was covered up with cement blocks and boards and stuff like that. And I don't know what the hell was in there. But to Joe's point, God only knows what they're going to find when they dig. I did some research, and my wife did as well, on the internet, and we found that Bostic, at one, it might have even been before it was called Bostic, it was United Shoe, but whatever was, that factory, whatever was in that factory, was one of the top 10 polluters in the state of Massachusetts. A lot of it was, a lot of the pollution occurred in the Ipswich River, which runs behind Bostic's building, which supplements our water supply, to my understanding. But if they polluted back there, you will never be able to convince me that they didn't dump stuff across Boston Street or Main Street, whatever. I think it's Boston Street, but I'm not sure. That they didn't dump stuff across the street where these pits were that we used to hang out at as kids. If they polluted in back, you're going to tell me they didn't pollute in front? And one other thing. I do feel, and maybe I'm out of line here, but I do feel like this is being forced down my throat, and it may, in fact, take place, sir, but I don't have to like it, and I don't, okay? I don't. My understanding is, Barry, correct me if I tried to listen to you earlier, the project will go through. The transfer of land from Richardson to the developer has not happened yet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So here's my question. I got a solution. And by the way, your solution of bringing the trucks in from Boston Street is excellent. That makes all kinds of sense, okay? To have an access road off of Boston Street opposite the factory. Because not only will there be traffic on Birch Street, but if anything comes in by truck from 128, they're going to come up Main Street, Linfield, past Sagamore Spring, if they're coming from 128 at Linfield, up Catherine Drive, left on Teresa, and then they're going to go down Brookbridge or Herbert or Magnolia to make a left on Villa Lane. So it's not just traffic on Birch Street. Whatever comes from 128 is going to be coming up Catherine Drive and down and to access Villa Lane. My street, Brookbridge Road, Herbert Ave, and Magnolia have all been repaved within the last 3 years. 35 years since they were last done. God knows how many phone calls I've made, complaining about it and whatnot. With your help, it got done. Now, to see a potential 5-year project going down these newly paved streets to ruin them again, it kind of breaks my heart. I don't like it. So if the land transfer from the developer, from Richardson to the developer hasn't happened yet, how about this? Take some of that money from the Community Preservation Act that is set aside to retain open space and make a proposal to Richardson's to buy it off of him, and maintain some open space. What's wrong with a little more open space in Peabody? They bought Tilly's Farm, good move. They put an addition on the library, or it was either the addition or the heating system at the library was done with some Community Preservation Act money. work was done to the George Peabody House with Community Preservation Act money. Why not preserve it as open space? If the transfer hasn't taken place yet, you know, you're telling me that this is a done deal, but the transfer hasn't taken place yet. How about the city buying that and making it a nature trail or a wildlife trail or something like that, and keep it as open space? That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Steve. Councilor Sinowitz.
Yeah, I just want to respond to a couple of things. So, number one, the word done deal. Well, first of all, it's not a done deal yet. This has to go back to the planning board. There will be multiple meetings on this, so I expect to get a good showing from everybody there to fight for our order of conditions. I would find it hard for them, just what I've witnessed and what the planning board has approved. I haven't seen them deny a subdivision. Unless there's some horrible, intense impact on the neighborhood, and I would say blasting and rock crushing is, and when it's not addressed or potentially to address. Did you know that one resident told me when they put sewerage on Brookbridge Road and that end of it in the 70s, they had a blast because the street was filled with ledge. So I hear from the developer, we're not going to have to blast. Do I believe him? No, and I wish I hope I'm wrong. I've said it again. But I'm hoping for the best that we can influence and work with the planning board to get these conditions, because I just don't see them saying no. It's zoned properly. They have the lot sizes, but all the peripheral things that can destroy the quality of life like it has in Ward 1 for many people. Now, can they deny it based on destroying the quality of life for people? If this was a one-year project and it was putting in 4 homes, we deal with it. But when you're talking of carrying it out over 5 years, and then depending on it's market-driven, it could be 3. Well, if it's market-driven, it could be 7. So that's a long time. So I don't like the word done deal, but I have to work with what I have. And I'll be at every one of those planning boards, Margaret. I'll make sure we'll drive together to the meetings.
You know what? I just want to be notified. Just the notification. It's not much to ask.
I got you. Now, I just want to address one other issue. The contamination, possible contamination in the soil. There's nothing in any of these reports that talks about a clean 21E. So I don't know if this is a cash sale. If he buys it cash, he doesn't have to do a 21E. If he's going to take a loan from a bank, yeah, the bank's going to say, give me a 21E soil test. So I don't know. I don't see anything in there about that. Steve brings up a great point. Maybe we could, but he's got to purchase and sale off the CPC, but he's got to purchase and sale if it goes through. So I just wanted to respond to a couple of things. I'll let people speak.
Thank you, Councilor. State your name and address for the record,
My name is
please.
Eddie Wilcox. I live at 17 Villa Lane. It's the last house leading up to this conservation land. And I really can't add any more to what's been said, but I see me taking a big hit on this, being the last house right there. And I just ask the council of anything they can do to stop this. I think it would be worth it for me, and I don't mean to be selfish, but I see nothing good coming out of this for me. Thank you.
Thank you. John, state your name and address for the record, buddy.
John Olympio, 7 Lone Pine Lane. I'm also a member of the school committee in Peabody. Order of conditions. I'm thinking out loud here. So there's going to potentially be blasting going on. We're in a school zone, Burke School. The children are out at recess. Never mind children, that's just blasting going on. Is there any way that we can restrict the times if they do have to blast? Because I can't imagine children that are playing in the back of the school at recess and you hear blasting going off in the day and age that we live in. I mean, that's probably going to cause some great concern, and this is going to go on potentially for an extended period of time. If there's any way that we can put some restrictions on that, not during school hours, that type of thing, I think that would be a great thing to be added to that order of conditions. Also, too, the parking, I know a lot of the workers potentially will be driving in trucks, but I would imagine there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are coming in their own vehicles. Where are those vehicles going to be parked? So that's something that else we have to consider, is where are those vehicles of the workers going to be? And then another thing, too, is what that gentleman just brought up, working after hours. They will try probably to push the envelope. We really do need to stay on top of them, working 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, potentially maybe on Sundays. That's really will be inexcusable in our neighborhood. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, John. Council Sinowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we, I'd like to have Herb Levine, our superintendent, come up and just address some of the things that have been said. Go ahead, John. Then we'll have Herb come up.
Yeah, John Anazis again. I was born in the city of Peabody. I've lived here all my life. And I've seen a lot of buildings. Peabody was 16,000 people when I was a kid. If everybody felt the way some people feel today, there wouldn't be any Magnolia Road, there wouldn't be any Villa Road, there wouldn't be any of the roads. There was only about 10 streets in West Peabody at the time. I know your concerns about the order of conditions and stuff like that, but you people wouldn't have your houses today if you said, well, use the preservation money or whatever to buy the land. People need houses, they have to go someplace, and like I say, Glen Drive wasn't there when I was a kid. Glen Drive was a sawmill years ago. So you've got to bite the bullet. People have to have a place to live.
Is there? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Ann Sullivan, 4 Brookbridge Road. And I just want to say it's absolutely imperative that they do that environmental study. It's not a question, because I can tell you if they don't and they put those homes in, some of us may feel that we need to tell the people potentially buying, go ahead and buy. But, you know, you ought to know what you might be looking at, because we've been in our house for over 30 years and they were doing a cancer study because there were so many incidents of younger people with cancer in that neighborhood. So it's true. So they've got to do the study. And if they don't, I personally will feel it's my responsibility to make sure people are not buying something that's dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll say it. You want to state your name and address for the record?
Herb Levine, 14 Hamilton Road. So I speak both as a neighbor in the neighborhood and superintendent of schools. Do you want me to speak, or do you want to ask questions? Barry, do you want me to just speak to some of the issues?
Superintendent Levine, just to address what you're concerned about the truck routes, the impact, if any, on the rock crushing and blowing towards the school, impact on kids outside of recess, just in general, your take through your experience, what you've seen.
Thank you. So I've built 6 schools now as a superintendent of schools, 5 in Salem, and now help build the middle school here, and we just finished that project except for the fields. My recommendation would be to look very, very seriously at blasting being a better option than the rock crushing. We found with our neighborhood that if we, first of all, we had the luxury of working with a very good blaster. They protected the blast zone with soundproofing, and we did it twice a day, 2 blasts. The neighborhood knew what time. So let's say that we chose 10 and 2, which was at the middle school. At the Burke, we might want to choose 9 and 1, which would prevent interference with recess, interference with going into school, and interference with coming out of school. In any case, you can control the blasting. You work with the construction folks, The neighborhood is told on what days they'll be blasting during a particular week. That's usually a twice-a-day proposition, and it takes out a lot more ledge than the constant pounding of rock crushing, which is very intrusive into the neighborhood, or can be with the noise, especially if they're going to clear cut the land. There won't be a tremendous barrier for noise. I'm even concerned about the noise impeding the teaching at the Burke School with a large stone crusher. Now, there is a possibility that they may blast and then they may have to stone crush anyway, because they will need that stone on site. But that's still, in my opinion, a better option than constant stone crushing, which could be 4, 5, 6 hours a day and could be very intrusive to especially any elderly people living next door. In that case of stone crushing, you can control that as well, and try to do that during the hours that most people might be at work and out of their homes, so that you at least limit the noise intrusion. As far as dust, I'm not quite as concerned about that because there are scientific ways of controlling dust during both blasting and stone crushing. Most of that comes from what Councilor Sinowitz already talked about, which is spraying the area with water. One of the orders of conditions should be that you insist that there's a water cannon on site all the time for any potential control of dust, particularly during the spring, summer, and fall months when it's hot and dry. My biggest concern, quite frankly, is the trucks. Again, I live on 14 Hamilton, so no trucks will be coming that way. No, I'm kidding. I live on 14 Hamilton, and my son lives on Catherine, so we live at both ends of the neighborhood being impacted, and my son has young children. My concern is mostly at the end of the day when kids are out of school and back into the neighborhood. There are a number of ways that obviously kids can get hurt, and trucks being a major issue. Birch Street is a very thin road, and I would hope that we would find an alternative method, as the councilor has talked about, in bringing trucks in and out. We found, and I have found throughout my career in building projects, that even people who want to comply with truck routes sometimes don't for a number of reasons. One, they will still rely on their GPSs. Wherever their GPS takes them the shortest route, that is often the way that they'll come in. Sometimes that violates the route that's been set. So you constantly have to keep working with the construction people to tell their truckers that they have to pay attention to the routes that have been set and not their GPSs. Two, you may have trucks delivering dirt. You may have other truck companies delivering masonry. You may have other truck companies delivering steel. You may have other truck companies delivering brick. Whatever it is, you may be dealing with 5 or 6 different truck companies. They don't all get the same message at the same time. You also have substitute truckers, people who don't do the same project every day. So for a variety of reasons, even under the best of circumstances and even with the best of intentions and the best of communications, there still may be trucks that go into neighborhoods when they're not supposed to. The way that we work that out with both the city councilors from the middle school neighborhood and the neighbors themselves, we had, and somebody had mentioned this, I don't know who, I'm sorry, but whoever mentioned it is correct. We had somebody responsible for immediately addressing any truck that came on site that didn't follow the correct route. And the way that we found that out most of the time was from either a neighbor who would identify the truck, the color, even the license plate, or from our own people who saw the truck coming in or leaving out of a route that wasn't prescribed by the community. So it won't be perfect, I can guarantee that. And it's not necessarily because people don't want to comply. It's just the largesse of the project will demand that we be vigilant in our own neighborhood and report to whomever it is that is going to be responsible for helping to control. In the case of a private project, it may be the police. In the case of a public project, we had public folks that were responsible for it. But being vigilant, being communicative, having periodic meetings, and by the way, I commend the City Council and Councilor Sinowitz for this meeting. We found that throughout the building project at the Higgins, the mayor called probably 8 meetings periodically throughout the project to have an opportunity for folks like us to come in and talk about what's going well and what's not. I think that would be a fine thing to do regarding communication. So I commend this body for doing this, taking the time to do this, having the forethought to do it, and talking about the issues that may come up. I'm also concerned about the wildlife in the area, and I am concerned about where that wildlife will go. I'm even concerned about the little wildlife. We did find that with the disturbance of the land, the little critters, they need a place to go, and sometimes it's into your home. So we need to pay attention to that as well, and there needs to be a rodent mitigation built into the order of conditions, because rodents are going to be disturbed, and they're going to look for another place to go, and the only place that they're going to be able to go is into the neighborhoods. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
State your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Alexei Oganjanian. I live at 11 Heath Road, which is just off the Russell Street and intersects with the Birch Street. I might be redundant to what some people already said because I came a little bit late, but I would like to mention that our street has a lot of kids living at the street, and I myself has a 7-year-old son, and he has friends who also just live across the street. And there are a lot of kids who go to Burke in the morning and back after school hours. And our kids play at the road a lot because they don't have another place to play basketball, soccer, or baseball, so they very often venture into the road. And our main concern is that we heard that there is a possible route for those trucks to go via our street, which is Heath. And we are very concerned for the safety of our kids. So please consider that, and if it is possible, to keep that street limited to the trucks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, sir. Just want to state your name and address for the record, please.
Leo Lodi, 9 Brookbridge Road. Just quickly, Barry, we talked last week a little bit about being a little proactive if you're a homeowner there. As far as someone mentioned pools in the neighborhood and foundations, you had mentioned to me last week about something the residents can do as far as videotaping, or someone comes out and videotapes your home in case there's a problem in the end. And you mentioned there was a certain distance you had to be within. I don't know if that can be expanded or not, but could you explain to the people that weren't at the meeting the other night what options they have?
Okay, I think I'd like to request that Officer Dowling come up. And Chris is one of our firefighters, and he handles all the blasting. And I've worked closely with him because of the quarry, so I'm pretty knowledgeable of blasting and rock crushing and all that stuff. But Chris can give an overview of, if we have to blast, what the process is and those pre-blast surveys.
I'm Lieutenant Chris Dowling, Fire Inspector, City of Peabody Fire Department. So, I'm sorry, your question again, Counselor?
Can you give us let's say the developer comes back and says we have to blast. Where do we go from there?
Okay, first we receive a blast plan, and according to that blast plan, we look at the radius of the blast. We establish a blast zone, and then to address the concern of the last neighbor, we identify anyone within 250 feet of that blast zone, and they have the option to receive a pre-blast survey. And that's where the videotaping and the documenting of any existing damage is done. And you receive a copy of that, and their insurance company receives a copy of that.
Lieutenant Darling, is the process, because it's a smaller site in relation to the quarry, would they be using the same, I don't know what they're trying to yield when they blast, but would they be using, do you know the amount of explosive? Like if we can compare it to, I know every site's different, but you know, in Ward 1 in Salamini versus what the quarry, how many, you know, cubic yards of stone they're trying to take out. Is in a development like this, is it limited by the amount of explosive?
I don't think we could compare this one to the Boulderwood project just because of the size. And it's very difficult to answer without a blast plan. But there is a difference if you're blasting just foundations or you're making what they call trench cuts for all the utilities and how deep, and it depends on the size of the utility. So it's a very difficult question to answer if it's about this project, because there's no existing blast plan yet. From what I'm told, there's no plan to blast, if all possible. But, so if they do decide they have to blast, that's when, like I said, we would receive the blast plan, and I would recommend that we have another neighborhood meeting so we could discuss the allowable limits that the state allows for the effect of blasting. And, but without a plan right now, I don't know how I can comment on it. What I can say is that everything Mr. Smith said is accurate about blasting. There is an effect on the neighborhood, and even though the state fire code and actually Mass General Law, Chapter 148, Section 9, sets the allowable limits for the effects of blasting, we receive many complaints. We've received hundreds of complaints for the Boulderwood project, and every one of those blasts were under the allowable limits. So there would be an effect based on the size of the blast. I don't think we can compare it with aggregate because they're using a different, they're using a slurry. But if we were going to compare it, I would compare it to the Litchfield project that was down the street from Bartholomew. There is an effect, but it's not going to be the same as Boulderwood. So I don't really want to compare this project to Boulderwood.
In terms of the pre-blast survey, what is it, 250 feet from, is that from where they're blasting, or is that from the property line?
So according to the blast plan, they're going to identify where they're blasting, the exact site of the blast. So we establish a blast zone, which is a 50-foot circumference or radius from that, the actual blast. And anything within 250 feet of that blast would be, would qualify for a pre-blast survey. So we would want the entire blast plan for the site before we started so we can identify every single one. Like there are certain areas that are remote from that 250-foot radius. So if it was right in the middle of this project, maybe only a few houses would even qualify for that.
Yeah. And having, you know, deal with the quarry all the time, just because it's 250 feet doesn't mean that people aren't impacted. So where the quarry is located, I've got complaints from Benevento Circle. I've got complaints from Jackson Ave. I've got complaints from Samos Circle. Depending on, you know, and blasting is so subjective, you know, in terms of weather, whether there's low cloud pressure, overcast, and with aggregate, whenever there's a potential of that or potential of rain, we've worked it out where they move it to another day to save the heartache of the neighborhood. You mean so? Just because you're 250, and I think the conversation with Mr. Lodi was, what I would do if I'm outside that 250 feet, I'd bring in my insurance agent, I'd do a video of my foundation, of my ceilings, because what's going to happen is they're going to put seismographs in certain locations in the neighborhood. And through experience, every blast will fall within that range. And when you have a complaint, they're going to send you to an insurance agent, and the insurance agent's going to go, nope, not us, sorry. And that's pretty much the fact. And as when it comes to aggregate, every one of those blasts has been within the seismograph readings that's allowed by code. Although we did have a person with a pool up on Wentworth Drive that cracked one of his pool lines. So when he went out in the spring, all the water was gone. He didn't know it drained out over the winter. So, and that was one of the few claims that aggregate actually paid itself. It wasn't a lot of money, $1,500, but it was like pulling teeth. So don't expect to anybody to pay anything, because that's my experience. But but I just wanted Lieutenant Dowling to, and once again, this is if we have to blast, what we as a neighborhood will expect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Sasslaw.
Thank you. I was wondering if Commissioner Tallarico could come up. I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask him. You know. So one of the things that I've heard a lot about tonight is responsibility and accountability. And I know you weren't here when Boulderbrook was being built, but it seems to me that we're trying to put together an order of conditions that are going to protect the residents. And I think you and I both know that your office is going to get a lot of phone calls if this project goes through. So what I'm asking for you is, based upon your knowledge, what type of things, who should be, for responsibility and accountability, I want to have some teeth and the tools that we have. What would you recommend that we would put in the order conditions to protect the residents, and also, quite frankly, to have a chain of command so that, you know, maybe you're not getting 1,000 phone calls, maybe you get 100 phone calls, I don't know, but I am definitely looking for you to say these are the orders of conditions that you think would be important to the residents to have in to protect them, and for them to know the chain of command, where it should go based upon blasting problem, trucking problem, whatever problem that you could foresee.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Al Tellerico. I'm the building commissioner for the city of Peabody. Most of the questions and the concerns that the councilors have brought up, and most of the people around the area, basically the things that I would, suggest to the planning board that that they need to put in there. I mean, we're talking about containment as far as dust. Water cannons was a suggestion by the school department. They've worked with the new middle school and knew those things would come up. I would also add to that street sweeping. During the summer months, you're going to have those areas where those roads where build up from those trucks going through mud, and those areas are going to be built up on the city streets. So that would be one of the things I would focus on primarily is the containment area. As far as the other issues, I'm really not, that's not my forte. I'm more concerned about the building dimensions, the size of the lots, whether they meet all those conditions. I use the planning board's order of conditions to do some of the enforcement on my side. That could be in conjunction with the police department, with the health department. It all depends on what the issue is that arises. We do our best to try to address all the concerns that the neighborhood has, but and I'm glad that we are actually having this meeting, because it kind of brings things to light and kind of shows you guys or the neighborhood what we what we're going to have to deal with on our end. Parking of the vehicles as far as the workers going in, and a big one is going to be times of operations, when they're going to be doing certain work. What are the days that they're going to be doing it? Typically, Monday through Friday, 5 to 5 or 6 is what a typical community allows. Saturday is about 8 o'clock to maybe 4 o'clock. But that's up to the planning board and the suggestions from the community as far as you know, what kind of hours can they absorb? So hours of operations, containment, blasting, when's that going to happen? If they're going to have a crusher on site, those are all good questions. And unfortunately, I'm not the guy that's going to be able to put those in. I will be able to enforce them once they're in the order of conditions as far as planning. But you know, those are the issues that my department's going to have to be dealing with.
Let me ask you one basic question, a pretty simple question from, I think, a resident's perspective. Let's assume they're going to start the development, and the easiest one that's apparent to all the neighbors is it's Sunday. They have a order that they cannot do anything on Sunday. No one's open at City Hall. All the apartments are home. We're going to answer the phone calls, but simple one of that, if they're up there doing work, who would you recommend in the order conditions would be responsible for enforcing that? And what type of enforcement? Are we talking about a ticket, or what can you do? I'm not familiar with this process myself.
As it is right now, this project is by right. And as far as, you know, I've been through the city ordinances, and I know I've addressed this issue with the council before. There is no set hours of operations. If they wanted to work on a Sunday, they can work on a Sunday. If that's not on their order of conditions through the planning board, then they'll be able to do that. You know, as far as the enforcement aspect, and I probably lost my train of thought right there, I'm sorry, could
Can I just interject?
On a Sunday, let's say we have an order conditions that says they don't work on Sunday.
The enforcement aspect of it, you know, we're off on Sundays. I mean, so I would get those complaints, and it's just like, you know, I've got to do my due diligence, go there, start asking questions, whether they are doing it or not, and it's a tricky situation. It really is, because from an enforcement aspect, you know, I physically can't see these people going in and out of there. I rely on, you know, the police department to actually go down there and make a report. Now, if I have that evidence, you know, I can follow through on it, and I can issue fines. That's basically it. Maybe a suggestion to put on the planning board's conditions would be to say, you know, after so many fines, there's got to be another review, or a job stoppage, or something that's, you know, kind of puts people back on the right track. So that's basically it.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Charis.
Thank you. To the chair, to Councilor Sinowitz, maybe he has the answer. Do we know who the potential developer is, and do we have any background, history, past history on the developer?
The developer is Mr. Krupe, Carl Krupe, and his attorney is Ethan Evangelidis. He's done work on Antonio Drive, which I do believe there was blasting and rock crushing. He's done work on Murphy Road. I think maybe Councilor Turco could, you know, give his experiences on dealing with that. But that's who the developer is.
Councilor Chair.
Thank you. So, I don't know, again, who this would be with the police or the building inspector, but do we have any past history of violating any of the work orders conditions that was set prior at other developments?
Through the chair to Council Chairs, I can't answer that. I'm not on a day-to-day operation of Ward 1. Believe me, if I was, I would know, but I would defer to Council Turco.
Council Turco.
Yeah, I mean, the two projects that Mr. Krupe did in Ward 1, one is Murphy Road, which was, I believe, 4 or 5 houses off of Bartholomew. That project was recently wrapped up with, and I was not on the council when it began, but it just wrapped up with paving. Some of the residents had, you know, issues with checklist items, but that's all through the, you know, the developer has nothing to do with us. On Antonio Drive and Elena's Way, which was a little bit larger, more similar to this size, just some issues that I've had to deal with on that. That abuts Linfield Street. There's 2 vacant lots, and I noticed that in this project there will be a vacant lot. I've called on several occasions to have the vacant lots cut, the vegetation cut back. It's unsightly to Linfield Street. Usually Mr. Krupe is responsive, but not till the end of the summer, when I've already gotten, 6 or 8 phone calls from those neighbors on Antonio. Also on Antonio, I did speak to many of the neighbors, and like I said, the project was already done by the time I got elected, but I do know several of the neighbors, and they said the dust was a major issue with the blasting in that area. And finally, and something that really concerns me, is Antonio Drive has been done for upwards of 5 years, and honestly, there's still a 30-yard construction trailer on the property that is adjacent to Linfield Street and viewable by Linfield Street. And I know Commissioner Tallarico has worked on that, but these are just things that I would ask Mr. Krupe if to not put these people through even the most minute things like that. It may be minute to somebody that lives a mile away, but when you live right there in the neighborhood, as I do, to look at a 30-yard construction trailer at the corner of a main street, as well as overgrown vegetation constantly, it's just something that should be addressed. And a lot of times I think this council, before I was on it and while I've been on it, gets a rap of this opinion that we may be anti-business or anti-progress. And honestly, I think it's the exact opposite. I think we just would like to see people respect our neighbors and our neighborhoods, and I think that's the priority.
Thank you, Councilor. Good information. Councilor Mann.
Thank you. Through you to Council Sinowitz, when in your discussions with the planning board, has the acknowledgement that Birch is a scenic road come up yet? Because it is.
Through you to Council Manning, that came up after the meeting. A couple of the residents neighbors on Birch Street brought that to my attention, and I think one of them had called the electric light to trim some trees, and they said they were limited on what they could cut on Birch Street because it was quote-unquote a scenic road. I don't know what the implication of that. I know that we were talking to at that meeting with the mayor and the department heads. I think the conservation was going to look into the wildlife issue, and that would be another one on the scene. I don't know if that would go to
The scenic way, you can't cut any trees or move any rock, like stone walls, without the approval of the planning board. But the planning board, it needs to be brought to their attention that it is a scenic road, because you know how it is. When nobody's looking, trees come down, and once they come down, they're gone. So make sure that in your discussions with the planning board that they recognize that it's a scenic way, designated scenic way, and that would explain to folks as well as why there are no sidewalks, is because it is a scenic way, and that's why there are no sidewalks on that road. And I don't know if a scenic way would assist you at all with truck restrictions, probably not, but it wouldn't hurt to ask. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Sinowitz?
I want to talk about just a couple of things, and before we actually I'll say one thing. Then I want to bring up the police, and then I want to bring up the Department of Public Works. They've been waiting patiently. One of the things that whenever a developer builds a project like this, he has to put a bond in. Okay? And what the bond does is it protects the neighborhood. Case like they did on Route 1 with Marchese's. He clear-cut the land, the development went south, he destroyed the quality of lives, damaged property. You have to have a bond. Now, I don't even know if that one, if there was a bond, I don't know what happened there. But this, if this project goes forward, this developer is going to be required to have a bond the full term of this project, and maybe 6 or 7 months after, to make sure that it doesn't come back to bite us. Because I did hear of and I don't know if it was this developer or another developer, that in Ward 1, that the project was done, the water line snapped from the street onto the person's connecting to his house. They went back and someone had pre-released the bond. So that person had to cough up $2,000 because the developer wasn't, you know, couldn't find it in his heart to come back and say, I'm sorry, I'll fix it. No, the bond was gone. It's like tough. So that bond is going to be there the whole time. And, okay, that's just a point I wanted to make. And I would request that the police please come up and...
Thank you, Counselor. I would just reiterate what you said about the access point being on Boston Street, if that's at all possible. Those small side streets would be difficult for the trucks, and particularly in front of the school during drop-off time and pickup time. It's very large volume of cars there. It would be difficult for those types of vehicles to be coming and going. And the police department would obviously prefer if they came in from that other access point that you had identified earlier. Unless you have any other questions.
Yeah, if we can't get an access route through Middleton, I think we'd be relying heavily on the police to guide us as what would be the least intrusive into our neighborhoods and protect the quality of life, to protect the safety of that school. And so, and I know I think they did it in Ward 1 where they registered it with the state, Captain Richards, and. So hopefully it doesn't get to that, but if I can't predict what's going to happen, because I guess the bottom line on these projects is you got to make a buck, and I think it would behoove the developer. I think if that was the case and they could get that through Middleton, I think your life would be a lot easier, and everybody around you would be a much easier, simpler process, and you'll build some great homes. And at the end of the day, you know, when they're done, it'd be an asset to the neighborhood, assuming you're building $750,000 houses. That's what I would assume. I don't think you're putting up Campanelli slabs, which I live in. But we may be coming back to you for that.
We'll definitely work with you on that.
And if Captain Richards could tell us just how that process, if we have to go down that road?
I would have to make application to Mass DOT for a designated truck route in and out of the project, and we would have to do an assessment of the neighborhood, and we would have to try and pick the best route possible to get the trucks in and out with the least disturbance to the neighborhoods. The issue you're going to have here is you have so many different ways in and out of that development that no matter which way we pick a truck route in or out, somebody's not going to be too happy about it. And that's just the way it is. And I don't want to be overly simplistic, but if we could have them cut a road in off of Boston Street, just an access road, in and out, everything can come off of Boston Street, off those main thoroughfares, and much of what we're discussing right here would be eliminated. So that would be my recommendation to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. The other thing I want to mention too is with enforcement after hours, whatever the special conditions are on the permit, oftentimes the police will get called because somebody's in a development working after hours. We have to send a police officer up there, they take a report, they submit it to the building inspector's office. It can become tedious when the phone calls come in and there's a lot of complaints. In today's technology world, I don't see, and I'm just throwing this out there for discussion, why the city couldn't post up closed-circuit TV cameras at the entrances and exits of that development that have timestamps on them that can document every single vehicle that goes in and out and the times they go in and out, and we can have an automated building inspector's office sending tickets out right off of that thing, bing, 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 and they get enough of those, they're going to shut it down. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll be on, bud.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
I'm Dave Terranzoni. I'm the interim public service director. I also live in Peabody, so basically our job at this point is the the planning board reviews the plans and then they send them to us as the engineers and we go through and check. We don't really deny or approve anything. We just basically look at what they're doing, make sure everything's sized properly, the roads are built properly, because we will be assuming those after the 3 to 7 years that they're going to be doing this. So we want to make sure everything's in place, so when we're taking care of the road now, we don't have to go back and say, why did we let them do this, or why did we let them do that? Unfortunately, my building inspector, my engineer, Will Politz, couldn't make it tonight, but one of the first things he does when he gets a report like this is he basically calls, we have 2 engineers, one works in the sewer, one works in the water. He sent those notices out to those guys, and they'll be reviewing the plans to make sure the water is sized properly, make sure we don't have a potential pressure problem, make sure the sewer is going to be not impacting the system too much, etc. As far as the drainage, we understand that there's a drainage problem up there. We've been fighting with it for a lot of years. Villa Road, the end of Villa Lane there. Hopefully we'll be working with the developer to maybe add a drain pipe into that road to kind of alleviate some of the water going down Birch Street. So we'll be looking at that. I'm sure we'll be checking out the drainage reports and everything like that. I know they do have 2 basins inside the property that they want to drain to, and then ultimately those will drain down to the Birch Street and down to the river. Other than that, any questions or whatever.
So, we talk about the truck routes, the access, whether it's blasting, whether it's rock crushing, all these things, safety of the kids. So now let's get down to drainage, okay? So I went through the plans and kind of and I look at the elevations, and I'm concerned because they wouldn't be putting in 140 foot by 120 foot and 3-foot basin if there wasn't concerns of drainage. So when this project, if and when it is complete, is the city now own that?
Yep.
It has to maintain it, and if it fills up with sediment, we have to dredge it. Does it have to be fenced for safety purposes? Are we going to stock it with fish? I don't. So, but to put that in, somebody's worried about drainage.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't put that in if you're not concerned about drainage. So, the next point is where Tanner's Ridge Road goes uphill. They're going to eject. We're not responsible for the storage ejector pumps, are we?
If they're individual injector pumps at the houses, then no, we're not involved. If they're all draining down to a separate pump station, and I haven't looked at the plans yet. I know Will kind of briefed me today, but I seem to think that there's like 6 houses that are going to have their own pumps. They'll be responsible for them. They'll pump it up into the drain where it takes over for gravity.
Okay.
But if they do drain down to a pump station, then yeah, we will accept that. And as far as the drainage, everything, once they walk off the site, we get everything. Okay. So, we're aware of that.
Everything coming off Villa is going to drain in part, a little of Tanner's, depending on the elevation. Stormwater is going to end up at the bottom at Birch Street at Mr. Mirando's house and near Mr. Anizis' house and Mr. Antonelli's house. So the concern is, if we talk about the amount, and I'm not an engineer, but if we're looking at Villa Lane and Mr. Wilcox got hammered, 3 feet of water in his house, because we helped him out with the berm and all that, but he's at the bottom of that hill. So if there's an inch of water, it may be an impact to him of 3 inches of water, because it's all coming down. That water now, probably better off for Ed, but it's going to go down onto this new road, and all that water and all that runoff from all those streets is going to head down and end up on Birch Street. And talking to the neighbors on Birch Street who live there, Teddy Eliopoulos, that there's 3 inches of water on the road. Mm-hmm. So I'm concerned that has to be addressed.
And right now, the stuff going, when it bypasses the catch basins on Villa, it just goes into this property. So, you have to pick up that too. So I think, again, we haven't looked at sizes, and the fact that they get the drainage basins, they want to try to catch as much water before it goes off the site and then control it going off the site. That's why those are in there, it's not a bad thing. It's just we do have to maintain them.
And I wish Will was here, because when I looked at the drainage maps, they have drainage maps doing easements through people's yards. So there was concern with the conservation that if there's enough water gets drained, you could almost create artificial wetlands in there. So I'm just a little kind of, he's the engineer
Well,
on this, but
there is a wetland up there, I guess they're draining into, and then it'll be draining out of.
Okay.
I think that's, should stay the same. I can't imagine it would grow. But, I mean, again, these concerns, Willow's gonna look into all this drainage stuff.
Okay.
Don't worry about that.
all right. Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
All
Thank
set?
you, Dan. Anybody else, any questions? Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to make one motion to start this off, and I'd like to make a motion to the mayor, Betancourt, to meet with Mr. Krupe and Mr. Vonzolidis about attacking that issue of getting an access road from Middleton, Bostic side into the property. So moved.
On the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? To vote.
Okay, and I'm just gonna, I think everything that's probably been said has been said, but I just want to just respond to one comment. Look, everybody has, quote-unquote, the right to do what they can do with their own land, right? But you're not gonna do it at the expense and the quality of life of everybody around you. Sure, we could use more houses, but it's not going to be based on getting blasted to Kingdom Come and have rock crushing and dust blown all over the neighborhood and flooded streets so somebody can make a buck. And we're going to do this project the right way. We can do it the easy way or we can do it the hard way. I've been through it many times, so if it's going to be the hard way, I'm ready for that. If it's the easy way, you want to work together, I'm there for you. So I'll say that to the developer, and we'll get that motion going, and I'll try my best. There's so many people involved to reach out and let everybody know of what's going on. The next step is another through the chair to Tim. I haven't been getting notices on the planning board meeting, so I'm running around trying to find when the meeting is. I don't even know, Margaret. So I don't know why it's not being communicated properly. So once we know that, I need people to show up once we get at that meeting, once we kind of start. It's going to be probably a negotiation, I would think, working with the developers right over there next to Captain Richards to the right, so people don't know. There he is, right there. And then we'll get the ball rolling, but I just don't want anything voted on or done because we don't know there's a meeting. So that's why let's get the meeting going with the mayor. I'll be there. We'll start to talk about Lucia, who's our conservation expert. There may be some issues there, but I think this city would work very closely with you to try whatever help you could do within reason to get that access road through Middleton. So, and that's all I have to say, and I want to thank everybody for coming.
Councilor Turk, I just want to say one thing.
I just wanted to say one thing to the residents, and again, thank you to George for coming. The reason why I know so much about the Litchfield project is primarily because of George Smith. And if I could give you any advice, city council has changed, department heads changed, police officers change. Keep the information. George has everything. He's been extremely helpful to me from start to finish. Please, and on the final note, I see a lot of people here today. George will tell you, as the meetings progress, less and less people come, and it turns out to be, 3 or 4 neighbors in the end that are left to fight the good fight. And I just ask that you stick together. It's a long road to get through this. George is still in the middle of it, as well as half of Bartholomew Street. So, again, keep everything and stick together, and thank you.
Thank you, Council Manning.
Thank you, and also the mayor, just so that you know, the mayor is very responsive when you folks call your counselor or an at-large counselor with these complaints of after-hour blasting or that they're violating the permit. Most of us will contact the mayor, and he is very responsive. So you don't get ignored. Just give us a call, and we'll forward it along, and we'll do what we can do. But the mayor is responsive to these complaints. So again, we'll all work together, and we'll get through it. Thank you.
Okay, motion to adjourn?